Welcome to this Smile Breakdown and Review. While I am a total wimp who can barely watch horror movies at the cinema, usually at home I am relatively okay. However, Smile, my god, did this movie shake me to my core. I wasn't expecting much from Smile as my spooky season this year has been kind of mid, but Barbarian has come in clutch in spooky overtime. And the premise here is rather simple and could be described as a murderous suicide chain letter. Okay, that's not rather simple. We meet Rose, who is a therapist in a hospital, overworked and underpaid with her sister, later saying she could be earning far more in a private practice. An urgent patient is brought in who witnessed her professor kill himself with a hammer. She's absolutely paranoid and has been seeing things as a monster supposedly haunts her and appears as people she knows. This will all happen to Rose. What's so clever about the jump scares, usually the bane of my life, is that you watch for the killer in the dark, the house, you like a door changes or whatever, but this thing can mimic anyone. Literally anyone can be the entity that's haunting her. It was bone-chilling each time, and the young woman brutally slits her throat while smiling, and the way it hangs on Rosie's face lets you know we're in for a bad or a good time if you're an absolute horror freak. Naturally, this eats away at Rose throughout the movie, as it would anyone, as we would learn that the young girl had a curse or a spirit passed to her, and it's gone on to her. For 20 years, a chain of suicide, or possibly a longer time as well, as I'll explain in a minute. Well, the chain of suicides in the most violent way have gone under the radar. A person will have someone kill themselves in front of themselves, and that person would have been cursed. It has to be in a violent way as the spirit feeds on trauma and paranoia. The witness is then cursed, and then they will end up doing the same thing as they saw, and the cycle and chain continues. Basically, the professor witnessed a woman kill herself at a convention, and before that she saw a man do the same at a petrol station, and on and on. It's gone on for a long time, but there is a way out. An accountant, as we saw in prison, got rid of the curse by killing someone brutally in front of a witness, and the curse passes to them. He learned this by someone in Brazil where a similar thing happened. But you are kind of still screwed as you're in prison for murder. Slowly, Rose starts to spin out as the spirit makes her paranoid and unwell. Her boss sends her home as she thinks a guy named Carl is violent, saying you're going to die. He's somewhat of a red herring, but I think maybe in a sequel he could be revealed as maybe an early victim who just could last having this paranoia constantly. But the entity wants you to be paranoid as her cat goes missing. It's revealed it's dead in her nephew's birthday present she wrapped, which is absolutely bone-chilling, absolutely gut-wrenching, and she ends up in ER. Now, Rose was already sort of at breaking point, working 80 hours a week with her husband barely there. Her mother also died of suicide, and we learned later she asked for help but she ran away. The professor's brother also died in a similar brutal way, so maybe the entity chooses its victims based on a predisposition to trauma. She runs by her old flame, a police officer, as they start to have theories that there is more than meets the eye with all of this. And they uncover previous victims and track down the professor's wife, and the professor was trying to work out a way to get rid of all of this, but it was futile as the curse is stubborn and it eats away at her non-stop. An intervention is staged, and it really made me uncomfortable as the therapist talks to her. She realizes it's not the real one, and the therapist slowly smiles. I was expecting a jump scare at any minute, but it didn't happen. And I can see why this movie over time has been doing insane numbers. I think it's made about $200 million, and I really can see why that the word of mouth with this is so very strong. It is a very solid horror movie, and it hurts watching it, but I enjoyed it. The entity wants to have a witness, so Rose comes up with a plan. The entity wants to feed off of trauma, but what happens if there is no witness? What if she can simply confront her trauma and try and stop all of this and stop this chain? It's a smart plan, but as we know, it ultimately does not work. She heads to her former family home with her personal life in tatters, and she makes a desperate final stand. However, her former flame of a police officer is insisting on making sure she doesn't. She thinks that she can stop this. We see her burn the place down. We think it works as she goes to apologise for not letting anyone into her life, but it was all in her head. She wasn't strong enough, leading her to kill herself and pass it on to the cop. By reliving her trauma, she thought it would leave, but it didn't. I love the switch as we think she escaped, and it reminded me of the movie Grave Encounters and the start to its sequel there. I won't say why, but that is one of my favourite horror movies of all time. It's made me feel disgustingly on edge as well. Overall, this film really was an absolute treat, which sounds weird to say, but horror is starting to get really good again, and I'm happy to say that. But that is it for this video. Please drop a like down if you enjoyed it. Do subscribe with notifications on if you want more from us, and I'll see you soon, and goodbye.